remember the smell first. Not the kind that hits you when you open the door to your own home after weeks away. No. This was different. It was almost my perfume, but sweeter, heavier, foreign. My daughter was resting in the car after her surgery, and as I stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, something deep inside me whispered that the house didn't feel like mine anymore. I told myself I was being paranoid, exhaustion maybe. But when you've lived in the same home for 20 years, you know when something's off. And something was very off. I walked through the living room and saw tiny changes no one else would notice. The throw blanket folded differently, a wine glass drying upside down in the rack. I hadn't opened a bottle in months. On the table, there was a half-burned candle. The scent was vanilla rose, my scent, but I hadn't lit that candle since last Christmas. I called out, "Mia?" half expecting her to answer. She'd promised to stay here while I was gone, to take care of the house, feed the cat, water the plants. I trusted her completely. My cousin, practically my sister, the girl whose mother I helped bury, whose rent I paid when she couldn't find work. But no one answered. When I reached my bedroom, my heart began to pound. The bed, perfectly made when I left, was slightly rumpled, the sheets creased as though someone had lain there not long ago. There was a mug on the nightstand, a white mug with gold lettering. I didn't own any like that. I leaned closer. "Good morning, beautiful," it said. Inside was a faint ring of lipstick, my shade. At least it used to be my shade before I switched brands last month. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The cat jumped onto the dresser, startling me. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was overreacting. "It's just Mia," I whispered. "She probably stayed in here by mistake." Still, I couldn't shake the unease. That bed, our bed, felt violated somehow. It's a strange kind of betrayal when someone crosses the invisible lines of your private space. You can forgive someone for breaking your things, but when they break your sense of safety, that's something else entirely. I called Mia's phone. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to sound calm. "We're back home. Everything looks fine. Just wanted to thank you for taking care of things." I hung up, but my voice trembled, because everything didn't look fine, and deep down I knew it. That night, after putting my daughter to bed, I made myself a cup of tea and sat alone in the dark living room. The silence was too loud. I noticed the faint red light blinking from the corner, the security camera above the bookshelf. Mark, my husband, had insisted we install them last year. "Just for peace of mind," he said. I almost laughed at the irony. Peace of mind. It felt like a lifetime ago. I told myself I wouldn't check the footage. I didn't want to seem paranoid, not even to myself. But curiosity has a cruel way of whispering when the house is quiet. I opened the laptop, logged into the security feed, and clicked on the last week's recordings. My finger hovered over the play button. I remember thinking, I'll just check one clip, just to make sure Mia locked up properly. But the moment I hit play, my entire body went cold. The first few seconds were harmless. The living room at night, faint shadows shifting as the cat wandered across the floor. Then I saw her, Mia, my cousin, my guest, my family. She was wearing my robe, the pale blue silk one Mark bought me for our anniversary. She was laughing, spinning around in it. Her hair damp, her smile wide, her movements too free, too familiar. I leaned forward, heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw something that made my breath catch. She walked toward the camera and kissed her fingers before pressing them against the frame. Like she knew she was being watched. I paused the video, replayed it, once, twice, 3 times. Each time, I noticed more details. The way she moved through my bedroom like it belonged to her. How she paused by my jewelry box, tracing her fingers over my necklace. And then she reached for a photo frame, our wedding photo, and whispered something. I couldn't hear it at first, so I turned the volume up. The faint sound of laughter filled the room, and then a man's voice answered. I froze, it couldn't be. I replayed it again, pressing my ear close to the speaker. The voice was muffled, low, familiar in a way that made me nauseous. My hands began to shake so violently I almost dropped the laptop. I turned up the volume again, rewound to the 4:12 mark, and that's when I heard it clearly. Mark, my husband's voice. He was laughing with her. In our bedroom. My breath came in short bursts. My vision blurred. I whispered, no, that's not him. It can't be. But I knew that laugh. I'd known it for 20 years. through sickness, through fights, through love. It was the laugh he only used when he felt completely at ease, and he was using it there, with her. I pushed back from the table, covering my mouth. I didn't want to wake my daughter. I didn't want to believe what I'd just seen. My entire body trembled as I scrolled through more footage. Different nights, same laughter, same voices. Sometimes they were sitting on the couch, sometimes in the kitchen. Once I saw her wearing one of his shirts. I could barely breathe. How long had this been going on? Did they think I'd never find out? Was this all happening while I was away taking care of our sick child? The betrayal burned through my chest like fire. Every kind gesture from Mia, every late meeting from Mark. It all rearranged itself into something ugly, something that made sense in the worst possible way. For hours I sat there watching fragments of my life unravel on that screen. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't. It was like staring at a wound you can't look away from. The more I watched, the more details I saw. A hand brushing a photograph, a whispered name, a stolen kiss in the hallway. Every frame was another knife. I thought about calling someone, my sister, a friend, anyone. But shame held me silent. I didn't want to hear pity in anyone's voice. I didn't want to be the woman whose cousin stole her husband. I wanted to understand why. Why her? Why now? At one point I heard a knock, gentle, almost hesitant. I turned toward the door, my heart racing. But it was only the wind. The night felt endless, each minute heavier than the last. I poured another cup of tea, but my hands were shaking too badly to drink it. The house that once felt warm now felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by the echo of laughter that wasn't mine. When I finally reached the last video, my throat was raw from holding back tears. I hovered over the pause button, telling myself I couldn't take another second. But I pressed play anyway. The footage flickered. The bedroom came into focus. The sheets tangled, two shadows moving, soft whispers overlapping. Then, for the briefest moment, Mia turned toward the camera. Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. And that's when I saw him, Mark, his face clear this time, his hand on her waist. I didn't scream right away. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. It was as if time stopped. The world collapsed into that single image, that single betrayal. Then it hit me all at once. I screamed so loud the cat bolted under the couch. I screamed until my throat tore and my knees gave way. The neighbors later said they thought something terrible had happened. They were right. Something had. Because when I paused that footage, when I saw who was in my bed, I realized this wasn't just infidelity. It was an invasion, a theft, a slow, calculated erasure of my life. And what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. What came next would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. People think betrayal starts with some big, dramatic moment, a fight, a lie, a secret you stumble upon. But in my case, it began years earlier, wrapped in love, family, and all the little acts of kindness that blind you to danger. I remember the day I took Mia in as if it were yesterday. She was standing on my porch with a single suitcase and eyes so full of pain I didn't hesitate for a second. Her mother, my aunt, had just passed, leaving her completely alone. She was only 19. I hugged her, promised her she'd never have to feel like she didn't have a family again. I truly meant it. I thought I was saving her. I had no idea I was opening the door to the very person who would later destroy the peace of my home. Back then, Mia was quiet but affectionate, always eager to help, always ready with a smile. She used to call me sis, even though I was nearly 10 years older. I liked that. It made me feel close to her, like I was finally doing something good for someone who needed it. My husband Mark adored her too. "She's the daughter we never had," he'd say. And I would nod, feeling proud of how we'd built this little extended family. We included her in everything: birthdays, Christmas mornings, even private family dinners. I'd find her sitting in the kitchen late at night, sipping tea, and we'd talk for hours about her dreams, her fears, her plans for the future. She told me once, "You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I belong." I believed her, and that's how she became the perfect houseguest. Quiet, considerate, helpful. She cooked when I worked late, folded laundry without being asked, left little notes on the fridge saying things like, "You're amazing. Don't forget it." I used to show those notes to Mark and laugh. She's such a sweetheart, I'd say. We're lucky to have her. And he'd smile and agree. At that point, everything seemed perfect. But perfection, I've learned, is often the first sign something's being hidden. The first crack appeared so small I almost ignored it. One evening, I was checking our joint account and noticed a withdrawal I didn't recognize. It wasn't large, just a few $100s. When I asked Mark about it, he brushed it off. I used it for groceries, he said, and maybe some gas. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? But then it happened again, and again. A pattern started forming, and yet I told myself, it's just life. We're all forgetful sometimes. I didn't want to seem controlling or paranoid. Then there was my wedding ring. I took it off one night before washing dishes, placed it on the counter, and the next morning, it was gone. I searched everywhere, even called the plumber thinking maybe it fell down the drain. 2 days later, I found it on my dresser. I assumed I'd misplaced it, but it was cleaner than before, almost polished, and somehow that detail bothered me more than its disappearance. Who touched it? I wondered, but I pushed the thought away. After all, Mia was family. Family doesn't cross those lines. As months passed, I noticed Mia growing more confident, almost bold. She'd sit on the couch in the evenings next to Mark, laughing at his jokes, leaning a little too close. I'd walk into the room and feel the air shift, like I'd interrupted something private. But when I tried to talk myself out of it, I'd hear my own voice in my head. You're imagining things. She's just comfortable here. She loves you both. Shame can make you silence your own intuition. Then one night, something happened I'll never forget. I was reading in bed when my daughter knocked on the door, her voice trembling. Mom, she whispered, can I ask you something weird? I smiled, half asleep. Of course, honey, what is it? She hesitated. Why does Mia wear your nightgown? My heart stopped for a moment. What? I asked, sitting up. What do you mean? My daughter looked down, fidgeting. I saw her last night when I went to get water. She was wearing your blue silk nightgown, the one with the lace. I thought maybe you lent it to her. I forced a laugh, too loud, too quick. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure you're mistaken. Maybe she has something similar. My daughter nodded but didn't look convinced. I told myself I'd confront Mia the next morning, but I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't want to embarrass her. And more than that, I didn't want to face what it might mean. What would you do if someone you loved, someone you'd raised like your own, started blurring the lines between gratitude and something darker, and you had no proof yet? As the weeks passed, small things kept piling up. Mia's tone when she spoke to me shifted. She started giving advice, subtle corrections, as if she were the woman of the house. She commented on how Mark liked his shirts ironed, what kind of tea he preferred, even the way he liked his toast. Once she laughed and said, "You've been married so long you probably forget his little habits." It was a joke, but the kind that cuts deep. I remember standing there, forcing a smile, wondering when the girl I'd helped became the woman trying to replace me. Then came the surgery. My daughter needed a minor but important procedure out of town. Mark couldn't come. He said work was too busy. Mia immediately volunteered to stay behind and take care of the house. "You shouldn't have to worry about a thing," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'll feed the cat, water the plants, and make sure everything's perfect for when you come back." I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone so devoted. But when she hugged me, something felt strange. Too long, too deliberate. She smelled like my perfume. I told myself I was imagining it. As I loaded the car, she waved from the porch, smiling like she always did. I didn't know that smile would haunt me later. It wasn't a goodbye to me, not really. It was goodbye to the version of me who still trusted her. While I was away, things seemed fine at first. Mark called every night. Quick conversations about work, weather, and how much he missed us. But sometimes his voice sounded distant. I'd ask about the cat, and he'd pause before answering, as though he was trying to remember the story he'd told before. I brushed it off, stress maybe, but one night when I called, Mia answered instead. "Hey," she said, cheerful and breathless. "Mark's in the shower." "Everything's fine here." I thanked her, hung up, and immediately felt something twist inside me. Why was she answering our phone? I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in that sterile hospital room beside my daughter's bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to drown out the feeling that something was very wrong back home. I thought about the nightgown, the perfume, the ring, about how Mark's messages had gotten shorter, more distracted, and about Mia. Sweet, lonely Mia, whose hugs had started to feel more like claims than comfort. A week later, we finally returned home. The surgery went well. My daughter was recovering beautifully, and I wanted so badly to focus on gratitude, not suspicion. But as soon as I stepped through that door, that strange scent hit me again. Familiar yet wrong. My stomach turned. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I needed rest, that I was imagining ghosts where there were none. I unpacked, tucked my daughter in, and walked into the kitchen to make tea. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper sticking out from under the fruit bowl. A store receipt. I picked it up, expecting groceries, but my name wasn't on it. The card used was Mark's. The purchase? A woman's bracelet, gold, with a small inscription, "Forever, M." My fingers trembled as I turned it over. The date on the receipt was from 3 days ago, while I was away. I felt something inside me crack open. Not just anger, but a deep, raw humiliation. Because suddenly, it all made sense. The laughter, the closeness, the late nights, the perfume. She hadn't just been living in my home. She'd been trying to become me. I stood there frozen, the receipt cutting into my palm, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the silence of the house. I wanted to scream, to confront, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. Because in that single moment, I realized the truth was far worse than I'd ever imagined. Mia wasn't just living in my house. She was trying to replace me. The receipt wasn't supposed to mean anything. At least that's what I told myself when I first saw it. A thin, crumpled slip tucked between Mark's shirts in the laundry basket. I only noticed it because of the faint glimmer of gold ink at the top. The logo of the jewelry store he and I used to visit every anniversary. At first, I smiled. Maybe he'd bought me something. Maybe he was planning a surprise after all those months of distance. But when I read the details, one diamond bracelet, identical design to mine, charged to Mark's card 2 weeks ago, my hands went cold. The last bracelet he'd given me was 3 years old, and I hadn't been in that store since. That night, while Mark was working late, I sat at the kitchen table with that receipt under the lamplight, just staring at it. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I'd learned to rationalize every oddity lately. The unfamiliar perfume on his collar, the way he silenced his phone at dinner, how Mia's laughter filled the air when he walked into a room. But something about that receipt, it felt like evidence, not just of deceit, but of intimacy, a replacement gift, for someone else. When he came home, I asked gently if he'd been to the jewelry store. He froze, just for a second, and then smiled, that easy, practiced smile I used to love. "You're imagining things," he said. "You know I don't even remember where that place is." And he laughed. But I watched his hands. They trembled slightly when he picked up his glass of water. I didn't push further. I just whispered "right" and looked away. But inside something cracked. That small, trusting part of me that used to fill the silence with excuses. It finally went quiet. The next morning, I began searching. Not wildly, not in panic, just quietly, methodically. I went through the folders on his laptop, the ones he thought I didn't know about. That's when I found it, a folder named Work Travel 2023. It should have been full of flight itineraries and receipts. Instead, it held screenshots, messages, photos. My breath hitched when I saw the name at the top. M. Just that single initial. I clicked, and there it was. "Your bed smells like her perfume again." My heart stopped, then another one. "She said she's coming home Friday. We'll have to be careful." I scrolled until my eyes burned, until the words blurred into shapes. M, baby, ours. It wasn't work travel. It wasn't even clever. It was them. Every word a thread pulling apart the life I thought I knew. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop through the wall, but I didn't. I just sat there, shaking. realizing how deeply I'd been replaced in my own story. For hours, I couldn't move. I just kept thinking M for Mia, my cousin, the girl who called me her sister. The one I raised? Could he really? But what happened next left me speechless. I decided to gather proof, real proof, before confronting anyone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I needed to know the truth, so that when it finally destroyed me, I could at least say I saw it coming. I logged into the home camera app. I checked the cloud storage. I opened the door to the digital archive I'd avoided since the night I first caught them on screen. Each file had a date, a timestamp, and a truth I wasn't ready to see. There she was, Mia, moving through my kitchen like she owned it. Her hair tied up, my robe draped over her shoulders, her bare feet on my tiles. I watched her stir coffee in my mug, the one with my initials. Then, a hand entered the frame. His, Mark's. He slid behind her, kissed her neck, and whispered something that made her laugh. That laugh. The same one I used to hear when she told me she loved me for taking her in. I paused the video, then hit play again, over and over, like punishing myself with confirmation. There were other clips too, little ones. Mia carrying out boxes, Mark's car in the driveway during his so-called late meetings, both of them moving through my home like ghosts of a marriage I hadn't buried yet. I started saving the footage, making copies, hiding files in cloud folders under random names, because by now I didn't trust anyone. Not him, not her, not even myself. It was like living inside a dream where the walls are familiar but everything's wrong, tilted, cold, unsafe. The next blow came from the bank. I noticed small withdrawals, amounts too insignificant to flag alerts but too frequent to be random. Then larger ones, and the name used for access? Mine. My handwriting, my signature. Except it wasn't. I went through the statements one by one, tracing the fake version of my name. Mia had always been good with details, always watched me sign birthday cards, school forms, bills, and now she'd used that knowledge to carve herself into my financial life. She didn't just want my husband. She wanted my name, my stability, my identity. I remember the night it all collided. I had printed everything. Receipts, screenshots, bank logs. My kitchen table was covered in proof of betrayal. When Mark walked in, I thought I'd finally say it. I'd show him what I'd found, demand the truth. But then he said something that stopped me. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly, almost like he cared. "I talked to Mia. She's worried about you." That sentence was a knife. She's worried about you. The irony burned. They'd turned me into the unstable one. I realized then that this wasn't just cheating. It was gaslighting, calculated and rehearsed. Mia had whispered in his ear, rewritten me as jealous, paranoid, maybe even sick. I could see it in his eyes and the pity, not guilt. He believed her. So I said nothing. Just nodded, smiled weakly, and let him go to bed. Then I stayed up all night watching the footage again. Not to find more evidence, I already had enough, but to understand how it happened. How the man who once traced love notes on my palm could now hold her that way. How family could rot from within and still smile at dinner. And then, as if the universe needed to twist the knife a little deeper, the email arrived. It was from my lawyer. Short, formal, bloodless. "Dear Mrs. Stanton, I have received notice from Mr. Stanton's legal representative regarding your separation." Separation. Not divorce. Separation. A word that sounds gentle until you realize it's the first stage of erasure. I don't remember much after that, just the sound of my own heartbeat and the faint hum of the fridge. I thought of my daughter upstairs, sleeping peacefully, believing her parents were still whole. And I thought of Mia, maybe wearing my bracelet now, maybe lying in my bed, maybe whispering to him that I'd lost my mind. What would you do if the people you loved most rewrote your entire life while you were still living it? Would you fight back? Or would you wait like I did, gathering every shard of truth until it could no longer be denied? Days passed. I moved like a ghost through my own home, pretending not to see the changes. My clothes slowly disappearing. Her scent in the air, his distance stretching wider each night. I didn't confront him, not yet. I wanted him to think I was still the blind, forgiving wife, the one who never asks the hard questions. Because soon I'd have to. But nothing prepared me for what came next. One evening, while folding Mark's laundry, I found a letter in his drawer. The paper was thick, expensive, folded neatly. Not like something impulsive. The handwriting wasn't mine. It wasn't his usual scrawl either. It was deliberate, almost tender. I hesitated, then unfolded it. The first words made my knees buckle. To Mia, my forever. And right then I knew. I hadn't just lost my marriage. I'd lost the illusion that love makes you safe. I still remember the sound of the lighter that evening, the soft flick of the flame as I lit the last candle on the table. Everything looked perfect. The roast chicken golden and crisp. The salad, chilled just enough. The tablecloth, white, unstained, immaculate. I'd even opened the same bottle of wine we'd shared on our 10th anniversary. To anyone else, it looked like the setup for a family dinner, one meant to heal, to reconnect. But I knew better. It was a stage, and tonight, the truth was finally going to take its bow. When I texted them earlier, "Dinner at 7. Let's talk like family again," both replied instantly. Mark sent a thumbs-up emoji. Mia added a heart. I almost laughed at that. The irony of her sending a heart when she'd carved mine out months ago. I spent the entire afternoon rehearsing in my head. Not what I'd say, but how I'd say it. Calm, collected. No tears. Because tears would make me weak, and weak was how they had built their empire. As I set the table, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I didn't even recognize the woman staring back, hair neatly pinned, lipstick steady, smile fixed. She looked composed, but her eyes, they were cold, dead calm, the kind of calm that comes after fire. My daughter sat quietly in the next room with my lawyer, who was setting up a recorder on his phone. I'd told her, "No matter what you hear, stay where you are." She nodded, though I could see the fear in her face. She was old enough to understand that this wasn't just dinner. It was war. The doorbell rang. My heart didn't even race. I opened it to find Mia, dressed in one of her soft pastel dresses, the kind that made her look innocent, pure. Behind her stood Mark, wearing that same easy grin that used to melt me. But tonight it didn't reach his eyes. "Smells amazing," he said, stepping inside like nothing had happened. "You didn't have to go all out." "Oh, I wanted to," I replied softly. "It's been too long since we've all sat down together." They exchanged a glance. A flicker of confusion passed over Mia's face, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "That's so sweet of you," she said. "We've missed you around here. Missed me." The words made my stomach twist. She said it like she hadn't stolen my home, my husband, my peace. We sat down. I poured the wine, my hands steady as ever. I watched them eat. The way Mark reached for the salt without asking. The way Mia adjusted her napkin with those delicate fingers that had once written me thank you notes. Every small gesture was loaded now, heavy with memory. For a few minutes, it was almost civil. I asked about their week. They lied easily. I smiled at all the right times. But the tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every passing second. Then I said quietly, "You know, being away gave me a lot of time to think. About the house. About trust. About what really makes a family." Mia's fork clinked against her plate. Mark looked up, his smile faltering. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing," I said lightly. "Just that I used to believe family couldn't hurt you. That blood meant loyalty." I paused, letting the silence stretch. But then again, blood stains the deepest, doesn't it? The color drained from Mia's face. I could almost see her calculating, deciding whether to laugh it off or brace herself. She chose laughter. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Maybe you need more rest." I tilted my head, studying her. "Maybe," I said. "Though it's hard to rest when your bank account keeps emptying itself." Mark's glass stopped midair. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. "The forged checks. The fake withdrawals. My signature and the one Mia used." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Mia snapped, "You can't prove anything." I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver USB drive. It slid across the table like a blade. "Watch it," I said softly. Mark stared at it, his fingers twitching. Mia stayed frozen. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. I pressed play on my phone. connected to the small speaker nearby. The room filled with sound, laughter, whispers, the unmistakable echo of betrayal. Their laughter, their voices, their hands on each other in my home. Mark's hand trembled. Mia's eyes darted around like a trapped animal's. You had cameras? She stammered. I had proof, I corrected. You thought you could live in my house, in my bed, wearing my robe, and I wouldn't notice? Mark tried to speak, but his voice broke. It wasn't supposed to— Don't! I cut him off. You made choices. So did she. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the clink of the wind outside. And then, the knock. Mia's head jerked toward the door. Mark froze. Who's that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth, I said, standing. Arriving right on time. When the officers stepped inside, their expressions were neutral, professional. Mrs. Stanton? One of them asked. I nodded. You can proceed, I said quietly. They turned to Mark and Mia. We have warrants for questioning related to fraud and forgery. Mark's face went pale. Wait, you called the police? I looked him dead in the eye. You called a lawyer. I called justice. Mia shot up from her chair, eyes wide with fury. You set me up, she screamed. You framed me? I didn't move. No, I said softly. You framed yourself. I just hit record. The officers read them their rights. Mia's voice cracked as she argued, insisting she was innocent, that I had hacked her accounts, that I was obsessed with destroying her. It was almost laughable, watching her cling to lies like lifelines. Mark didn't resist. He just looked down, silent, ashamed. As they led her toward the door, she turned back to me. You think you've won? She spat. You don't know what winning looks like. I didn't answer. I just stood there, calm, steady, watching as they disappeared into the night. The sound of the police car pulling away felt like an exhale after years of holding my breath. For the first time in months, my house was quiet. No laughter that wasn't mine, no footsteps that didn't belong. My daughter came out of the next room, tears in her eyes. She ran into my arms, whispering, It's over. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because people like Mia, they don't disappear quietly. They slither, they scheme, they survive, and I was right. 2 weeks later, I received the lawsuit papers. Mia had filed charges against me. Me, for privacy invasion and emotional distress. She claimed I'd hacked her accounts, manipulated footage, even planted fake receipts. Her lawyer called it a malicious attempt to ruin an innocent woman's reputation. I remember laughing when I read that phrase. Innocent woman, she had stolen my life, and now she wanted to play the victim too. But beneath the laughter, there was something else, fear. Because I knew how persuasive Mia could be. She'd fooled Mark, my family, even my friends for years, and now she had her eyes set on the courtroom. Mark, meanwhile, stayed silent. No apology, no explanation, just absence, the kind that feels colder than hate. As I sat with my lawyer, preparing for what was coming, he asked me a question that haunted me for weeks. Are you ready to hear her version of the truth? Because Mia always had a version, always a story that twisted pain into pity. And I knew she'd use it against me. I thought the dinner had ended the nightmare. I thought exposing her would be enough. But as I stood in that courtroom weeks later, facing her across the room, I realized something chilling. She wasn't scared, she was smiling, and when the judge called my name, and Mia smirked across the courtroom, I realized she still had one more secret left to use against me. I swear I never touched her, I said, my voice trembling as it echoed off the wooden walls of the courtroom. But no one looked at me, not the judge, not the jury, not even Mark. They were all staring at Mia, sitting 2 rows ahead, dabbing fake tears from her eyes with a trembling hand that had never once known guilt. She looked so fragile, so broken, but I knew better. I knew those weren't the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a woman terrified her lies were about to collapse. The air in that courtroom was heavy, reporters whispered. My own mother-in-law avoided my gaze, her face tight with disappointment. Everyone had already chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Mia's lawyer stood and painted me as unstable, jealous, obsessed with destroying a young woman's life, and Mark sat beside her, head bowed, pretending to be conflicted, as if he hadn't already betrayed me in every way possible. Every time our eyes met, he looked away. That hurt more than anything. I wasn't just fighting a mistress. I was fighting my husband's silence. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout or cry. I simply said, "If you want the truth, Your Honor, I can show you." There was a pause. The entire room froze. Even Mia's crocodile tears stopped mid-drip. I reached into my folder and pulled out a small silver USB drive, the one they thought I didn't have. My fingers shook as I handed it to my lawyer. Inside that tiny piece of metal was everything. Every whisper, every laugh, every lie. When the footage started playing, you could hear a pin drop. The camera showed my living room, our living room, the one I once filled with flowers and family photos. And there they were, Mark and Mia, laughing, plotting. Her voice was sharp, almost gleeful. "She'll never know. Just empty the accounts before she gets home. She trusts you too much." Then Mark's voice, low and cold. "She doesn't deserve this money anyway. She'll be fine." There was a collective gasp. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Mia's lawyer immediately objected, shouting about privacy, about consent, about manipulation. But the judge silenced him with one firm hand. "Continue the playback," he said. And in that moment I saw something flicker in Mark's face. Not guilt, not shame, but fear. As the recording continued, Mia's facade began to crack. Her hands fidgeted. Her leg bounced beneath the table. And then, when her own voice said, "Once she's out, we'll sell the house and split it," she buried her face in her palms. The woman who had smiled at my pain for months finally looked like she'd seen herself for who she really was. But Mark, he didn't look at me, not once. He just stared down at his wedding ring, the one he'd refused to take off even after moving out. I wondered in that split second if he was regretting everything or simply calculating his next lie. When the footage ended, the courtroom was silent. My lawyer's voice broke that silence. "Your Honor, this is the unedited footage. Dated, timestamped, verified. My client did not hack, did not forge. She documented." The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. And then slowly, he turned toward Mia. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Mia's lip trembled. She's lying. She edited it. She's obsessed," she screamed. But her words sounded hollow now, desperate. The people who once pitied her now saw what I had seen all along. The manipulation, the charm that hid the rot underneath. Mark tried to speak next, but his voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. The judge's gaze snapped toward him. "You participated in theft, Mr. Harlow. Forgery. Fraud. You mean to tell me you didn't mean it?" I watched his shoulders collapse under the weight of truth. For the first time, I saw him small. The man who once towered over me, who made me doubt my own mind, was now just a coward exposed under fluorescent lights. And then came the worst part, the public humiliation. The news spread like wildfire. By noon, neighbors who once smiled at me were whispering in grocery aisles. My daughter called me crying after school. Her friends' parents had seen it on local TV. I didn't even know how to comfort her. How do you tell your child that her father destroyed everything for greed and lust? But I stayed strong. I had to. Because this was no longer about saving a marriage. This was about saving my name. When the judge finally spoke, his words felt like thunder. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Restitution and damages to be paid in full. All accounts frozen pending audit." Mia gasped. Mark's head dropped. My lawyer squeezed my hand under the table. It was over. But as everyone began to leave, I stayed seated. I watched Mia walk past me, her heels clicking like hammers against the tile. And when she reached the door, she turned and smirked. That same cruel, knowing smirk that had haunted me for months. In that moment, I understood something chilling. Even when you win, there are people who never stop fighting dirty. Justice doesn't break them, it exposes them. And that's when they become the most dangerous. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Microphones shoved in my face. Questions like knives. How does it feel to be vindicated? Do you forgive them? Will you rebuild? I smiled faintly, but inside I was hollow, because no verdict could give me back the nights I cried alone, the trust I buried, the love I lost. Still, for the first time in years, I felt air in my lungs. Real air, not the suffocating fog of suspicion and lies. When I got home that evening, I sat in the same chair where I had once watched the footage that destroyed my world. I opened the window and let the breeze in. The silence no longer scared me. It comforted me. Because now, at least, I knew the truth. But as I stared at the stack of legal documents still sitting on my counter, something inside me tightened again. Because one of them, one I hadn't seen before, had a new signature at the bottom, Mia's, and a note attached in her handwriting that said, "See you soon." My hands went cold. My freedom had come with a price. And the war, I realized, wasn't over yet. And when the judge's gavel fell that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. But I also knew some people don't stop until they take everything you have left. The morning after the verdict, the house felt like a stranger's memory. Quiet, hollow, and too clean. Every sound echoed. The tick of the clock, the hum of the fridge. Even my own breathing felt intrusive. The walls that had once held laughter now just held echoes of betrayal. I walked through each room one last time, touching the furniture like I was saying goodbye to ghosts. The bed where Mark and I once dreamed of growing old together. Gone. The curtains Mia had chosen under the pretense of helping me decorate, ripped down. I sold the house within a month, not because I had to, but because I couldn't bear to sleep another night under a roof that had sheltered their lies. When the movers closed the door behind them, I stood there with just a single suitcase and a box of old photos. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. People talk about closure as if it's something someone else gives you. A conversation, an apology, a final moment. But I learned that closure isn't handed to you. You build it yourself, one painful choice at a time. My daughter and I moved to a smaller place by the sea. 2 bedrooms, a tiny balcony, and a view that felt like a promise. The first night, we slept on mattresses on the floor, surrounded by boxes. I remember her saying softly, "It's so quiet, Mom." I smiled, even though my eyes were wet. "Quiet is good," I told her. "Quiet means peace." That night, I didn't check the locks 3 times. I didn't scroll through messages looking for evidence of betrayal. I just listened to the waves, the wind, the sound of something inside me finally beginning to heal. Sometimes healing doesn't look graceful. It looks like crying over broken dishes, like standing in line at the grocery store and realizing you don't know what kind of cereal you like anymore because he always chose for you. It's slow, it's lonely, but little by little it's freeing. The cameras still sit on my shelf, the same ones that once caught every lie. But now they face the window. I use them to record sunsets, seagulls, the way light touches the water at dusk. It's funny. The same lens that once revealed betrayal now shows me beauty I'd been too blinded to see. Weeks turned into months. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping women who, like me, had been told they were crazy, dramatic, or too emotional. Every time I listened to their stories, I saw pieces of myself. I realized that surviving isn't about being unbroken. It's about learning how to live with the cracks. And then one afternoon, as I came home from the shelter, there it was. A letter in my mailbox, with handwriting I hadn't seen in almost a year. Mark. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "I'm sorry for everything. I lost more than I can ever get back. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I read it once, twice, and then I tore it in half. Not out of anger, but because I knew what forgiveness meant now. It didn't mean letting him back in. It meant finally letting him go. A few days later, I heard from a friend that Mia had left town. No one knew where she went. Some said she'd fled to another state. Others whispered that she'd been seen working under a new name. For a while, I hated that I didn't know. I wanted her to face what she'd done. But eventually, I stopped wondering. Some ghosts don't need closure. They just need to stay gone. I still think about her sometimes. Not with rage, but with a strange kind of pity. What kind of emptiness must live inside someone who can destroy a family just to feel powerful for a moment? There are nights I wish I could ask her, why me? But I already know the answer. It was never about me. It was about control. One evening, my daughter and I sat on the balcony, watching the ocean swallow the sun. She looked older now, stronger. "Do you ever miss him?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not the way you think. I miss who I thought he was, the version of him that existed in my head." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat there in silence for a while, and then she smiled faintly. "You're happier now, Mom." I looked at her, really looked at her. The peace in her eyes, the steadiness in her voice. "So are you," I said. That night, after she went to bed, I walked down to the shore alone. The waves were cold and sharp against my feet, but I didn't pull away. I let them wash over me, the salt, the sting, the memory. I thought about all the times I'd begged the universe for justice, for answers, for things to make sense. And standing there, I realized something. Maybe life doesn't always give you answers. Sometimes it just gives you freedom, and it's up to you to decide what to do with it. What would you do if someone shattered your world and then handed you the pieces? Would you rebuild, or would you walk away? For a long time, I carried my pain like proof. Proof that I'd been wronged, that I'd survived. But one morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't the wife, the victim, the betrayed. She was just me. And for the first time, that was enough. Now, I wake up before the sun, make coffee, and write in a little notebook. Things I'm grateful for. The smell of the sea. The laughter of my daughter. The quiet. The peace. The freedom. Because that's the thing about starting over. It doesn't erase what happened. It just reminds you that what's broken can still be beautiful. Sometimes people ask if I'd ever take Mark back if he truly changed. I always answer the same way. You can forgive someone without giving them access to you. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about reclaiming your power. I don't tell this story for pity. I tell it as a warning. Because betrayal never starts with grand gestures. It starts with small, almost invisible moments. A forgotten text, a secret password, a mug left by your bed that doesn't smell like your perfume. Those are the sparks that burn down your world if you don't pay attention. But I also tell it for hope. Because when everything falls apart, you learn the most powerful truth of all. That you never needed anyone to save you. You only needed to remember who you were before they made you forget. So tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Because I have. And it didn't make me weak. It made me free. And that's when I learned the truth. Freedom isn't given, and it isn't bought. It's earned, through pain, through loss, through the courage to start again. Freedom is the greatest inheritance,